in prayer.
Thank you, Dana, and good afternoon, everybody. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord God, you came to give honor to the least, those forgotten, overlooked, and misjudged. You came to give first place to the last, those left behind, misunderstood, and undervalued. You came to give a warm welcome to the lost, those who are orphaned, abandoned, and destitute. Help us to be your ears, to listen to their cries. Help us to be your voice, speaking out love and acceptance. Help us to be your feet, walking beside those in need. Help us to be your hands to clothe, feed, and shelter them. You came for the least, the lost, and the last of this world. Lord, hear our prayer. Amen.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Dana.
Now it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker, Kevin Creamer. Kevin has spent 3 of his 5 years at Catholic Charities overseeing the workforce development program in both West and Central Baltimore. He currently serves as the manager of the client services team at Our Daily Bread Employment Center, overseeing the Work for Success Job Readiness and Job Placement Program, the West Baltimore Community Connections Food Pantry Program, the St. Edward's Automotive Technician Training Internship Program, and the Earned Benefits SNAP Screening and Benefits Enrollment Program. He received his Bachelor of Science in Environmental Science from the University of Notre Dame in 2013, and his Master of Arts in Systematic and Philosophical Theology from the University of Santa Clara in 2015. Now I would like to turn this over to Kevin Creamer.
Thanks so much, Dana, and thank you, Bill, for having me today. I feel very fortunate and very blessed to be able to talk with each of you today on this, because I think for a number of reasons, it is such a relevant discussion to have about workforce development. So touching on the previous presentation, I know Allison has done a presentation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm going to be followed up here in the next presentation from Dr. Means on a presentation on trauma. And I think workforce development has so much to do with those two things, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But before I do, I thought it might make sense to just zoom out a little bit and talk about our place within the Catholic Charities program structure as a whole. We are so fortunate to be a part of an organization with the size, scope, and perspective of Catholic Charities, and so we have programs that run the gamut from Head Start through senior communities. And so in terms of what workforce development does and what we aim to do, we are more on the systems change side of things, right? We have to and must, as an organization, meet the immediate needs of people, right? What I like to say is workforce development is sort of the teach a man to fish side of things. But the reality is that hungry people are poor fishermen, right? That if individuals don't have the stability, if they're wondering about food access at the end of the day, you're not going to be your most effective interviewer, right? You're not going to have the time or focus to go about the job search process in the way that's going to reflect you in your best light, right? You need a support network in order to do that. And so that's sort of where we step in. It's not to replace, but in fact, depends on the work of the other programs of Catholic Charities. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But, you know, the mission of Catholic Charities is to cherish the divine. And I think there's, certainly for me, and I'm biased here, no better way to do that than to give a person an opportunity to shine their talents into the world, to show them, not only to help them see their own worth, and there's a couple of reasons that I'll talk about in a minute about why people might not come to us and generally don't come to us with a good sense of that self-worth. But then also to give that gift back out into the world, to say not just we have something to give you, but you have something to give the world, right? That cherishing the divine benefits us just as much as it benefits you in the work that we're doing. So with that being said, I thought I might talk a little bit about just how we're structured, how we're built. As Dana, in her generous introduction, mentioned, I work as the client services manager at Our Daily Bread. And so there's a number of programs that help us to do that work interconnected with the work of Catholic Charities. So first and foremost there is our Workforce Success Program, the program that is most explicitly thought about when we talk about our employment. It is an intensive workshop series for job readiness training. So individuals will come to us, and our team meets them where they're at. So we do an assessment of their job readiness, asking questions about work experience, asking questions about their skill set, things that they like to do, and also the barriers that might have been presented to acting on those interests, right? Things like a criminal background, things like a lack of a stable housing, transportation barriers. And so we collect all of that information at the outset because if we don't understand the person, we can't be good advocates for them, right? We need to understand the full picture. There's a temptation sometimes, and particularly for people coming to us, that they just want a job, right? I want the job, get me to work, and we want that too. But if you don't understand the full picture, we don't come to our work in a vacuum, right? We bring who we are, our full selves to that, whether we want to or not. And so in order for us to be there in the way that we need to be, we need to understand that full picture, not in a judging sense, but in an understanding of where are you coming from and where would you like to go, and let us help you get there, right? We're not going to give you, by and large, skills that you don't have. We're going to help you see the skills that you do have that you might not have been trained to see. And then we're going to move the things out of the way that have blocked you from doing that. And so some of the ways that we go about that, Dana mentioned the earned benefit specialists. We have a dedicated team, 2 individuals, and we've actually expanded it with another 3 individuals during COVID with a hotline, a SNAP hotline, to help with supplemental nutrition assistance program in SNAP, food stamp applications, and other benefits. And what that does is it creates a foundation to act on, right? We don't consider our work done in terms of submitting those applications. But again, without a stable food situation, it's hard to do anything else. It's hard to act on anything. So we want to recognize that while our goal is long-term employment and career-based employment, that we have to meet those immediate needs. We also have a team of information and resource specialists whose whole job is acting as sort of the 1950s operator when someone calls into us, connecting them to resources that exist across our city. It's a very relational position, but again, the understanding is that there's a lot of things that go into the job search, right? It's getting colder, right? So access to winter clothing, access to interview attire. These are all things that play into the job search process for us. Once an individual goes through our Work for Success program, and we have a dedicated instructor for that program, they get paired with a job placement specialist. That person creates a one-on-one employment plan with the individual. It networks with the employers, so they're talking to employers that would be a good fit, right? And again, we've gotten to know this individual now, having worked with them through the process, and then helps advocate on their behalf with employers. And our responsibility, another thing that I like to say, is twofold in this situation, right? It's our responsibility to be an advocate for this individual, to get them into a position where they're allowed to succeed, they're supported in success. But we also have a responsibility to the employers that we work with, right? And the access that we're granting them to the amazing potential that exists in our city. I alluded to earlier why this is a timely conversation. And in part, there's much attention that's being rightly paid to the role that systematic racism has had in excluding individuals from certain opportunities, right? When we first started the St. Edward's program, which is part of Our Daily Bread, in 2015, we established that program in the 21216 zip code. It's the zip code directly west of Sandtown, Winchester, where Freddie Gray had been killed. And part of that program's explicit intent was to serve individuals with no fewer than 3 barriers to employment. And those barriers, as I mentioned, were things like transportation, but also included things like lack of high school attainment or GED, criminal background, things like that. And even being in certain zip codes in the city, automatically, I mean, you can look at health outcomes from the health department in the city. You're at a disadvantage being in certain communities that are cut off from these opportunities. Their employment opportunities, right, in terms of where employers are located. And so it's a timely conversation because we're a program and a mission that's positioned to act in that, to create that lasting change by helping to educate employers about the potential that exists in places that they might not traditionally think to look, but also to help support individuals who are facing those barriers and aren't resourced enough to address them alone, to help move through them and find employment, to be ready for work, right? And so part of that long-term approach was our automotive program and continues to be our automotive program. So in addition to the general job readiness training that we provide, we also have an Automotive Service Excellence, or ASE, certification training program that we host in partnership with Vehicles for Change. And you may have heard of that. They do wonderful work donating cars to families in need. And I've thrown up a picture now of Miss Tanisha, who is one of our graduates, now working at Jiffy Lube. Miss Tanisha was actually a friend of a Head Start parent who was in Head Start directly below the St. Edward's Workforce Program, had seen our flyers in St. Edward's and came to us never having worked on cars before, and now is an expert at it. She's been in that garage for, I think, 2 years now on North Howard Street. And so, again, it goes to show, it's continually humbling to see when given the opportunity, when given access to these trainings, and we cover the cost of individuals going through this training, they're provided with toolkits upon graduation, to see what's possible for individuals. When they're, the work that we do at the outset is what I call motivational interviewing, but it's helping individuals to see, right, when you're born in areas where there's not opportunity, the message that you're implicitly given is that success isn't for me, right? That these things that are possible, that there must be something wrong with me that I'm not accessing. And so motivational interviewing helps people to see that, no, it's training you to see your own skills, right? Before we get into the actual interviewing part, right, which is you selling those skills, you need to believe it yourself. If you don't believe it yourself, the message is not going to land. And so it's important for us to create that light, right? To take away the shades that have been put on that light, and you've been deconditioned people to see that, so that we can shine that light for others. And so it's a great partnership that we've had there. We've had great success with individuals, so they become, again, Automotive Service Excellence certified in brakes. There's a number of different levels to that training that are available, and so the highest, and thank you for that transition, the highest is the Maryland State Inspection Training Program, which is a very difficult test to pass. If you get those, emissions testing letters in the mail every once in a while, you're familiar with generally the work of the MSI folks. Not just that, they do more, but you have an opportunity, starting at Jiffy Lube around $12 an hour, continuing on with Vehicles for Change. If you're asked onto their Master Technician program, you're looking at closer to $20 an hour, and then MSI trainings can be upwards of $30 plus an hour. And so a great opportunity, again, not just for a job, but for a career, for something that's long-term sustained. And then an opportunity too to do that work in your community, right? To give back to your community and create not just individual flourishing and success, but to shine that light where you grew up, right? Where you maybe didn't see that. And so it's a blessing to be able to do that. Brandon, who pictured here, just passed his his MSI training last week. We were fortunate that same week to be able to start someone else in that training. And we've got someone who's in that training right now. So, great to see individuals progressing through. I guess I'd like to talk a little bit in mentioning these different realms about just how we hold ourselves accountable to our mission, right? There's power in intentionality, there's power in focus, and part of intentionality for us is just making sure that we're measuring ourselves against where we want to be. With employment, that's very direct work, right? That's so we want to make sure we're tracking things like how many folks we're serving, right? What their starting wage is, how long they're staying within those jobs, and that all comes through our placement specialists. So the conversation we're going to have here is sort of twofold. One is about outcomes that we've had to date, and then another is both outcomes that we've had now when workforce has been more challenging, and then some of the things that we're doing differently now because of that very same fact, right? So in last year, through both St. Edward's and Our Daily Bread, we placed 75 individuals across the city and county and surrounding areas in employment at a starting salary of $13.80 on average, $13.80. Now in COVID, right? So since March 18th, we're just about 6 months in terms of when we've ceased in-person operations of some of our programming. Our Vehicles for Change program is in person now again, but we've placed 30 individuals at a starting salary of $14.14. So those have been hard-fought placements. We've worked hard for that. And I'd like to talk just a little bit about how we're doing that work differently when that in-person connection was so valuable before, right? It's more relevant, and I don't think it'll be a surprise to anyone to hear this, but with so many people out of work right now, workforce development and connecting people with opportunities is more important than it's ever been. But it's never been harder because places are slowing down hirings. They're starting to move back up. But even more than that, the in-person connection that made that work possible hasn't been possible. And so I'd like to talk briefly just about some things that we're doing differently, and then I'll transition into just where we're going from here. And then I think there's time for some questions. But we've moved our trainings virtually. And so what we're doing right now, our job readiness instructor is doing this to audiences of folks accessing us remotely. We're continuing to work, right? Because you've probably heard mention of what they call the digital divide, right? But those same barriers to access of resources exist in terms of barriers to technology access, right? So things like internet and phone. Some people's primary method of accessing those things was the Pratt Public Library system, right? That's not currently possible. So we've done a fair amount of education or tried to educate people. Most people do have phones. So, downloading Zoom as an app, or doing video chats or one-on-one conferences with our job placement specialists. We've continued that work. We're also preparing ourselves and moving towards readiness for a hybrid delivery model. So we may be delivering these workshops in the community in person, but also casting them out to an audience that's accessing from home, so that we're meeting the needs everywhere that they're at. Much of our placement now has come in the essential areas of work. So those are places like hospital systems, right? Doing general building maintenance, porters, environmental technicians, custodians within Johns Hopkins, University of Maryland Medical System, Future Care, which hires for those hospitals as well. It's also been in some of the other places that have seen upticks, like warehouses and retail stores, grocery stores. And we want to be mindful of the fact that some of these positions are shorter term. And so we want those positions to create an opportunity for flourishing in the moment, but also with an eye towards opportunities moving forward, of continuing to build those skills. And so that's the value. I mean, we continue, our work isn't done at placement. I mentioned the role that we play in retaining jobs, but we stay attached for as long as you'll have us. We continue to work. We say 2 years, we formally track retention up to 2 years, but we're not going anywhere. And so the power of having this institution of people knowing, of being attached to the meals program, which many people do know at Our Daily Bread, and being able to start a conversation with folks, even as we're giving out the food in boxes remotely, of we're here to do employment work too. And so it's that connection that creates opportunities for us. Just sort of by way of looking forward, projecting ahead, some of where we're going. We were fortunate to be accepted into a grant program, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which originally generated the St. Edward's Workforce Development Center through the One Baltimore for Jobs program, has again offered a grant opportunity that we were approved to serve youth in occupational training programs. So we're focusing on the need to serve youth more effectively. We've come to know in our service that many of the programs and the messages that get sent in workforce development are geared towards more adults who understand that, right? The message about this is what you need to do to get a job sinks in more easily if you've had the experience of failing not doing that, right? And so some of that experience is hard won, but that message needs to be delivered differently to a youth who may not have worked before, right? Or is passionate about doing this thing, but doesn't like the idea of a 9-to-5, right? And so working with an individual to understand, all right, well, what is your ideal work environment? Preparing individuals typically to compromise on some elements of that in order to succeed, right? Because it's not just about you, it's about a team when you join an organization. So recognizing that you also have to be looking out for somebody else and creating that environment, which means it's not all about you. But focusing that in a more explicit way. And that's actually going to let us expand our occupational training tracks to provide an IT training for youth through a relationship that we have with another nonprofit organization, and in partnership with our Head Start program, the child care certification training, 90-hour child care. So again, with a career mindedness of making sure that we're providing not just a job today, but a career for tomorrow. And then I would say the other big future-oriented focus that we've got is making this work community-based. I mean, I mentioned being born in certain areas of the city means that you're cut off from opportunities. It's much harder to get to where jobs are, to where training to prepare you for those jobs are. And so we're working with a number of different community organizations, neighborhoods, associations, both in West Baltimore by the St. Edward's location, and around our daily bread and across the city, to be where we need to be to deliver that, to not treat our institutions like castles that we don't leave, but going out of the door and meeting people where they're at, both physically and figuratively, so that training becomes something that is able to be acted on, that we're, and I will say, for my part, that we've learned just as much doing that, I think, as we've given, right? We've gotten more than we've given there. We've understood better who we need to be by being in the places that we need to be. And that work's ongoing. I mean, that's not a new priority for us, but I think the clarity with which we see it is only increasing. And it could not be a better time, as things start to open up, of course, for us to get out of our comfort zone in terms of where we've offered these services and to expand that network. And so I think with that, I don't know if I'm over time or not, but I know that there was, I think, a video presentation that gets into some client stories too. So I do want to make sure to leave time for that. And then, of course, there'll be time for
Sometimes it's challenging, exciting, and rewarding all at once. We do intake. Some days I do intake. Other days I'm out in the field contacting employers and also trying to get new clients. So it's every day is different, but it's rewarding.
My life has changed gracefully since finding St. Edward's and staff members like Mr. Townsend Ellaby or Miss Sabrina Smith. I'm more encouraged about life itself. I enjoy the services in which they provide, and I look forward to excelling.
To see someone come in, a new client, and you can see the apprehension in their face, and just over time, just see it disappear, and you see that apprehension turn to a smile, and then you can see that there's hope. You know, you see it's replaced with hope. And that's the most rewarding thing.
My nearest plans for the future is to obtain gainful employment and do everything that I can do to be a significant provider for my family, friends, loved ones, and community. My more longer term goals are to be able to give back to my community in some sense of a nonprofit organization, which like St. Edward's provides, or whatever services that may be needed at that time.
To come to do my job to the best of my ability, to help our clients, to help our students better their lives. And that's most important to me.
The power of one, multiplied.
All right, thank you, Kevin. We'll now open up a Q&A session. If anybody has questions, does anybody have a question for Kevin?
Kevin, I have one. With the COVID, has it been tougher to, place our folks that are going through the training program?
I'd say yes. And it has come with a redoubling of efforts for us. And so, I mean, I'm still very proud of the outcomes that we've gotten there, but every step of the process becomes a little bit harder at a distance, right? And employers aren't hiring as many individuals as they used to. They've been more cautious. Some places it's slowed down. But we're seeing that pick back up again. And so while it's been challenging, we're not far behind where we would like to be in terms of our pace there. We saw 75 individuals over the course of 12 months last year get placement with us. We're at 30, so projected out 60. Given that challenge, we certainly want to see that number increase and are committed to doing that. But it's a challenge that we recognize that's sort of twofold, both the access question of folks accessing our services and seeing us in person, which we're addressing sort of by the remote support we're providing, but also a challenge that our employers are having. So we're also trying to be mindful about talking to them and saying, we recognize that maybe just asking you, do you have jobs, isn't the most helpful thing for us to do right now. What would be helpful for you, right? How can we still be a support when your needs might be different? Because they're just as unprepared, right, for this reality as you and I, and certainly our clients. This is a new normal, not to abuse a very, very oft-used phrase, for each of us. And so while it's more challenging, I think it has helped us see, what really works, right? What are the core elements of what we provide that can continue, right? The one-on-one relationship doesn't have to be in person. It certainly helps. But we've still seen success through that, although we've had to pivot. And one thing as a bit of a tangent that I want to mention too is that that means leaning onto the full Catholic Charities network, right, for a no wrong door approach, right? If someone comes into one area, to have that program be thinking about employment referrals. And so I had mentioned the Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act program, the youth service program. That's actually housed in our Elevate program, which is run by another individual, Mark Saunders. And that is an intensive wraparound service for individuals attending community college to help retain and stay attached to that process. The research has shown that if you don't have a support network, if you're within a certain income threshold and go to a community college, get an associate's degree, but don't have a support network around you, that success rates are very low. And so we've had to so that program is our intentional response to step in and do that. And so the fact that we're able to serve individuals coming through that program as well, to say, now you've got your degree, let's step in and find work, has helped us to stay attached where we need to be to people who need our access services by communicating with the network that already exists.
So I've got a follow-up question.
Yeah.
We've got some industries that are clearly hiring en masse and growing when you think of supply chain management and everything that's going on in Amazon. And so are we creating any kind of specific training to, around those growth industries?
We focused our, so some of the more targeted career trainings we've done have been based on research that the city has put out about what some of those growth industries are. In terms of specific customer service, so I'm talking specifically about automotive and IT in terms of us stepping out into that space. The work that we've done in terms of preparation for some of those other, like Amazon positions, has largely been relational with the employer. So we've worked, and again, leveraged the work that other programs across Catholic Charities have done. I mean, in this instance, a good example would be Gallagher Services has a very robust, what they call job skills inventory for individuals at Gallagher Services, which is a program that serves individuals with intellectual disabilities, where a job developer will go to an employer with this checklist and talk about their needs to better understand them. And sometimes the needs that emerge aren't just the jobs they've got posted on their website, but they'll notice something walking through or in conversation, say, this presents as a need you may have. So having those type of conversations helps us on an individual level to prepare someone to step into a job. So I guess part of the answer is no, there's not been a holistic or maybe group approach that we've taken there. But because of the relationships we have a good sense of how to prepare individuals for stepping into those. But we're certainly always looking to improve that. I mean, I think as we continue to have those conversations with employers, we'd like to increase the scale. And when we have classes where individual interests are somewhat shared, that we've got, it's sort of by chance of what interest levels we get for different positions when they come to us originally. But if we've got a number of people who, for example, are interested in customer service or interested in automotive, we can invite employers to talk about what they're looking for in those jobs. So we have tried to do that in places, but it's likely been more individual focused or individual needs focused. Oh, I saw someone's hand go up, but I can't.
Lisa, you're on mute.
Does anyone else have a question for Kevin?
Lisa.
I think Lisa does.
I can't hear you, Lisa. I'm sorry.
Lisa, we can't hear you.
Can you unmute, please?
If it doesn't look like she's muted, there may be a problem with the sound. If you want Lisa to type the question in the chat, I can take it there.
Still can't hear you. Well, Kevin, while Lisa's typing that, while she's typing that question, I had a quick question for you.
Sure.
One of the tropes that I've heard a lot has been that, a lot of particularly younger people in these areas that you're talking about, their financial prospects or their economic prospects appear to be greater in, whether it's the drug trade or some sort of illicit, illicit enterprise. What type of interaction have you had with folks who maybe have gone that path before, or is there like an ongoing quote unquote competition in those spaces with those types of scenarios?
It's a good question. And, you know, it's one that gets a fair amount of attention, I would say, in our city. I mean, debate about squeegee kids coming up to the windows always generates some sort of angst about opportunities for youth. And that's just one example. But what I'll say to that is, you know, the competition exists because other opportunities aren't being presented, right? We have to make what we offer more attractive to someone. But the message that someone receives, right? If you don't have an employer who's sending a message, right? And it starts maybe in physical location of where things are at, right? But if the bus line isn't consistent, right? You're being told in a lot of different subtle ways that it's not important for you to be a part of this larger system. And so what the message that people take with that is then, all right, well then I'll work outside the system, right? I'll figure my own thing out. So that is, I think, part of the competition that we have. It's not a moral judgment on those kids, but it's the message that they're given and what they do with it. So our role there is the motivational interviewing piece, right? To be maybe the first person who's told that person, there's talent that you have that we can find an avenue for, right? That it's our job to create that for you or find it where it exists. And so, you know, part of that is a larger question too, right? I would say our work is both short-term in the sense that we're working at individual jobs and careers, but we also want to change the conversation of who has access to that and who's accessing our services. And that's true, I think, of Catholic Charities more generally, right? If we're doing our job well, we don't want to see the same people accessing or the same communities coming to us every time. We want to be changing, moving the needle in terms of who's coming to us. So, you know, the overwhelming reality of it is that we want to be changing that landscape moving forward, right? That those individuals come to us with a great amount of potential, a great amount of skill. I mean, frankly, some of those illicit trades that you mentioned require a great deal of skill to manage, and that those are skills that are being utilized maybe in a way that we wouldn't want to see, but the skills are there, right? And so if someone else isn't going to reward them for it, they're going to find a way to get rewarded. And so we have to, our job is to create that incentive, right? It has to be attractive. And that's on us, right? That's a failure of the system to find an avenue for youth with great opportunity. And so that's where we need to step in. It does look like Lisa was able to type her question. Okay, so the question for anyone who's calling in and may not be able to see this in the chat, Promise Heights focuses on the full pipeline from 0 to adult, focusing especially on youth. While we're encouraging students to aim for college, we know that many middle and high school students will be interested in job training. I'd love to know more about how to gauge them with your opportunities, youth and childcare certification, automotive, etc. As well, many families lost jobs due to the pandemic, so that's another community we'd love to. And that's fantastic. I would love to continue that conversation. One of the things that we found, right, people keep talking for youth, but people aren't talking to youth. And I think that's another place where we've gotten better. I've been a part of a number, so I sit on the Baltimore Workforce Development Board's youth subcommittee for the city. And they have youth come in and talk. And one of the things that says, everyone wants to know what we think, but no one wants to talk to us. Everyone wants to leverage our experience to help do their work better, but they don't want to pay us for our knowledge. And so we feel like we're being used, but not given opportunities. And so the conversation starts there. I mean, it means being held accountable for who you weren't listening to before. And I'll say that's true of community-based work. That's true of working with youth. But it also means partnering with organizations that are doing this work honestly as well. So while we're very proud of the work that we do, Baltimore is a small city in a lot of ways, and it helps to work closely with other organizations who are good at this. So Youth Empowered Society, yes, is one of our core mentoring partners and engagement partners for this WIOA program that we'll be starting in October. The Youth Opportunity Centers at both West Lafayette and the HEPCAC Center on the East Side are partners of us as well. And so that's places where we start the conversation. Again, starting with the youth though, not just our program partners, not asking what does John want, but asking John what he wants. And then Lisa, to your other point, our decision to co-locate St. Edward's Workforce Center on top of a Head Start was very much a intentional two-generation focus. So we've also taken, I mentioned the community-based work we've done. We've targeted that to a number of other Head Start locations as well. And so I'm also happy to talk about what we've learned doing that work and ways that we could work with Promise Heights in terms of connecting to both of those communities. Because again, when their supports haven't been there, the message that needs to be delivered first and foremost is that there is a network there. And the more people that come forward with that message, I think the more powerful it is. So we love to do that jointly. I mean, I would love to continue to talk on that.
Kevin, do you want to talk a little bit about, and follow up to Scott's questioning, our community partners, employment partners that offer career pathing to people we encounter and engage, like the health system, for example?
Yes, that's a great point. So one of those community partners is Johns Hopkins, and so they offer what they call their on-the-job training program, or OJT training program. It is an internship program up to 90 days for individuals who, again, may not have experience working in a healthcare setting, but we refer those individuals, right? And then they start the job, essentially. They get paired with the manager that they would get placed with, and it's a pathway, right? That job is if they succeed within that internship opportunity, that job is held for them at the end, right? And we've had many individuals at our Christopher Place Employment Academy, which is co-located again with Our Daily Bread, and is a more intensive residential employment program. But many individuals accessing our Work for Success program that have been trained through that. And it ranges from administrative clerical hospital positions through EVC and environmental care technicians, and different roles, security as well. And so there's an opportunity to get a hands-on training with the promise of a job at the end as well, which is very attractive. And we have a couple of other healthcare partners. I think Gardenzia has provided that for us as well. We've worked closely with other substance use treatment programs. I mean, not just our own internally, but Turk House in terms of individuals who are coming out of substance use treatment and ready for employment, but come to us with the understanding that substance use constitutes a barrier, that it'll be challenging to talk about gaps in their resumes, for example, that are presented by that. And so yeah, we're lucky to have employers who are also trainers and help to prepare individuals for those opportunities. And we try and have that kind of relationship with a number of different individuals that we serve. Another good example there would be Second Chance, which is a warehouse, another nonprofit that takes donated furniture and refurbishes it, right? Gives it a second chance. But the name is twofold in that it also gives individuals who face a number of different barriers to employment a second chance. So they become floor managers. There's a deconstruction training program through the city that's available there. And so, again, career pathways for individuals where they can get trained, and in the case of Second Chance, trained and paid to get trained so that they're prepared for that next step in the career.
You have any other questions for Kevin?
Kevin, one more quick one, if you don't mind, from me.
Mm-hmm.
More of a human interest take. You know, a guy like yourself, a young guy with impressive degrees and things like that, you know, why Catholic Charities? Why'd you choose this work? What is it about it that, you know, animates you and makes you want to do this on a daily basis?
It's a good question. I'm not someone who, you know, leans on the credentials or anything, but my graduate degree is in theology, and for those who have stepped into graduate degrees, it can get very cerebral. It can get very distanced from the reality. And so the initial answer to that question is that I wanted to walk the walk. I wanted to, and the long-term answer is that once you see the reality of the need and you feel the human connection, that there's no other option. You can have as many degrees as you want, but once you have that experience of understanding of truly, and again, this is where the idea of treating your neighbor as yourself meets the reality of, if that person is me, how would I treat that person? It changes everything. So you know, I'm corrupted for life as far as it goes. I'm stuck, but it's a beautiful stuck. I mean, I wouldn't want it any other way. So it's a level of understanding and commitment that can only happen when you let go of maybe the ego that comes with, oh, this is the status that I have, and embrace the communities around you as an extension of who you are, that we are more than ourselves, because we're better off that way. I mean, we all are. And I you know, a lot of attention is being played in the current environment about how that hasn't been done for communities for a long time. So now's the right time, right? If you're on the fence about jumping in, jump in, because it changes everything.
Thank you. Great answer.
Thank you, Kevin. Are there any final thoughts you'd like to share with us before we close?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'll just say, thank you for joining me, and I hope you've learned something. Please, if there are things that you'd like to continue the conversation, I know Lisa and I in particular will continue. Let me know. Like I said, and it's not just trite, but this work is communal in every sense of the word, and so we're better doing it together. So we are kept accountable to the folks we serve by asking them, right? And the youth I mentioned will tell you when you're not got the right target, but we're accountable to the community that is us, right? We are us, and Baltimore's a great place to do that because it's already got the community feel. But if there's anything that you'd like to learn more for, again, like I said, dipping your toes in changes everything. If you'd like to get more involved in any way, also let me know, because there's a number of different ways to do that. We're working with a number of volunteers remotely who are doing resume coaching for our clients at a distance. So they're doing it from home. We're looking at different ways to start community engagement conversations with our volunteers, helping them be a part of that work as well. So if there's an interest, there's a way, and we're committed to finding out what it is, because like I said, we're better when that work is joined.
Great. Well, once again, I'd like to thank Kevin Creamer for speaking with us today, and thank you to our guests for taking time out of your schedules to join this session. Our next session will be hosted on Thursday, October 15th at noon. We will be discussing trauma with our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Ronald Means. We hope you will join us. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.